Hello everyone, this is Here's Trivia, and today we're concluding Sima Zhao's Intent Let's Talk Lore series with episode 4, titled Sima Zhao's Reputation. Before we get started, here's the answer to our trivia question from the end of our last episode. Now, last time we deviated from the story to memorialize Emperor Tomo's life and legacy, but as we return to the story at hand, we find Emperor Tomo's bloody body lying cold in the middle of the street right outside of the east gate of the Imperial Palace, as no one knew what to do in the aftermath of Emperor Tomo's death. When the news reached Sima Zhao collapsed onto the floor, bowing down in shock, while his uncle, Grand Tutor Sima Fu, immediately rushed to the scene, crying his heart out as he sat next to the emperor's body, placing Emperor Tomo's limp head onto his lap, as Sima Fu blamed himself for the misfortune that has befallen the young emperor. Sima Fu then decried at the murderers responsible for Tomo's death as Cheng Ji, along with his older brother Cheng Cui, who was a lieutenant captain, would be both arrested and imprisoned. Now, Sima Fu was a very interesting member of the Sima clan. As the younger brother of Sima Yi, Sima Fu was already 81 years old at this time, and throughout the rise and fall of the Sima clan, Sima Fu had this keen ability to maintain just the right amount of distance and association between himself and his older brother Sima Yi so that they would not negatively affect one another. In short, Sima Yi and his sons did everything deemed necessary for the survival and success of the clan, while Sima Fu maintained this pristine image needed by the clan. So Sima Fu's outcry here during Tomo's death was more or less an act meant to show the Sima clan's remorse and regret about this outcome. Meanwhile, Sima Zhao was busy summoning his allies at court to figure out how to handle the political backlash that was sure to come. Sima Zhao's biggest concern here was not the death of the emperor, but rather the damage to his personal reputation. And to be honest, I believe Tomo's death is the only reason why Sima Zhao ended up not usurping the Wei dynasty himself. Regardless, his situation at the time did not look good, as his political ally Chen Tai, the son of Chen Qun, who came back from the scene of Tomo's death, suggested to Sima Zhao that Jia Chong must be executed to quell the public anger, as after all, it was Jia Chong and his troops that halted the emperor and ultimately led to the emperor's death. Hearing this, Sima Zhao asked if there was any other way, as Jia Chong was one of his closest advisors and confidant, and thus someone Sima Zhao wanted to protect in this instance. Chen Tai informed Sima Zhao that he does not see any other way, and then excused himself to grieve in private. Now, Chen Tai should be considered as a conflicted neutral party at court, as he was a trusted ally of the Sima clan due to the closeness of their families through the relationship of Sima Yi and Chen Qun. But as a classically trained Confucian scholar, Chen Tai was probably also respectful and loyal to a degree to the emperor, or at the very least, everyone is shell-shocked at the manner of Tomo's death. And as a matter of fact, Chen Tai is recorded to have died himself not long after due to grief and old age. Sima Zhao ended up not heeding Chen Tai's advice, as instead he met with Empress Dowager Guo in an effort to force her to collaborate on a lie with him to explain away Tomo's death. In Sima Zhao's explanation, when Tomo set out to leave the palace with armed guards and eunuchs to kill him, Sima Zhao was ready to face his judgment in peace, as after all, it was the will of the emperor. But when he heard that Tomo's band was on their way to the Empress Dowager's palace, he feared that Tomo was going to harm her royal highness, and thus Jia Chong was sent to protect the Empress Dowager. Unfortunately, in the tussle that ensued, Cheng Ji did not listen to Jia Chong's command and instead rushed the emperor's chariot, ultimately resulting in the tragic death of the young emperor. Now, because Tomo was already dead, and Empress Dowager Guo still needed to rely on Sima Zhao to select the next emperor, she ended up going along with Sima Zhao's version of the story, as Cao Mao would be posthumously given the label of being an unfilial pious son to the Empress Dowager, and was thus stripped of his emperor status. This was important to Sima Zhao because this softens the impact of Cao Mao's death, as it was now no longer the slaying of a righteous emperor, but rather just the tragic death of an unfilial pious son that was now just a commoner. However, this also meant that Cao Mao was going to get a commoner burial, which is an embarrassment for both Cao Mao himself and for the court, which is why senior officials such as Grand Tutor Sima Fu and Grand Commandant Gao Rou came out requesting to at least give Cao Mao a prince-tiered funeral, which was naturally granted by Sima Zhao and Empress Dowager Guo. As punishment for Cao Mao's death, Cheng Ji was sentenced to clan execution to the third degree, to which Cheng Ji was furious to learn, as he felt he was being abandoned and scapegoated by Sima Zhao and Jia Chong. On the way to the execution, Cheng Ji and his brother managed to push their way out of the escort, where they climbed onto the nearest rooftop to scream out their curses at Sima Zhao. Shortly after, archers ended both of their lives, as Cheng Ji and his clan would become the first victims of the purge following Cao Mao's death. Imperial Secretary Wang Jing, who refused to inform Sima Zhao of the emperor's intent, was deemed disloyal and also sentenced to clan execution. Wang Jing's mother famously had the last words that everyone will die eventually. The only regret would be dying for the wrong reasons. And knowing that they were dying for their loyalty to the emperor, there is no regret and thus no need for grief. Lastly, various gate captains in the imperial palace, who Sima Zhao deemed slow to act against the emperor, were also executed and replaced. When the purge was finished, there was still the matter of a new emperor that needed to be addressed. Going by the closest bloodline, the natural choice would have been Cao Mao's younger brother, Cao Qi. But given the manner of Cao Mao's death, Cao Qi was simply not considered. Instead, Sima Zhao set his eyes on the 15-year-old Cao Huang, who was the son of Prince of Yan, Cao Yu, and a grandson of Cao Cao. Technically, Cao Huang was a cousin to Cao Rui and should not have been considered for the throne, but due to Sima Zhao's insistence, Cao Huang was picked to become the 5th emperor of Wei. Sima Zhao's son, Sima Yan, would be sent out by his father the day after Cao Mao's death to travel to Ye to welcome back the newly selected emperor. And by June 27th, after a court-mandated name change, as Huang was a repeat name for the Cao clan within the last 7th generation, Cao Huang ended up becoming Cao Huan and officially ascended the throne as the new emperor. 3 days later, Emperor Cao Huan offered Sima Zhao the titles of Chancellor of the Kingdom, the Duke of Jin, and the 9 bestowments. But once again, Sima Zhao would politely decline in another effort to cast his image as a loyal servant of the Wei dynasty. But by this point, it was clear that the Sima clan had full control of the Wei court, as the tragic death of Cao Mao proved that really nothing could shake Sima Zhao's grip over the kingdom. While the usurpation of Wei and the creation of the Jin dynasty would still have to wait for 5 more years, as Sima Zhao would now shift his attentions outward for the conquest of Shuhan. It can be said that the 3 failed rebellions of Huainan and 2 forceful emperor swaps in the years following Sima Yi's coup signaled the fall of Wei and built the foundation necessary for Sima Zhao's son and heir, Sima Yan, to ultimately create the Jin dynasty and bring an end to the Three Kingdoms period. And with that, our series here on Sima Zhao's intent and the fall of Wei is finally complete, as we'll return next week to cover a new topic that'll be determined by a community poll. So hopefully you all have enjoyed this episode and series enough to consider subscribing to the channel. For more content on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel, by leaving a comment below, or just by hitting the like button. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye!